Information on Bruce Orr's testimony. He is Texas Congressman John Ratcliffe, and from the Hill, John Solomon. We'll start with you, Congressman. Let us talk about what we learned today. Is it true? Did Bruce Orr ever testify before Robert Mueller? Did that come up today?
It did come up, Sean. I have to be careful. I know your viewers want information, but there's a confidentiality agreement. But you have good sources. I listened to your monologue, and you're on track with respect to.
Well, I heard he never testified to Robert Mueller, and you're smiling, so I'm guessing that's a good guess. Now, John, wouldn't that mean a lot if he didn't testify before Mueller, considering what we have 60 some odd pages of notes, all the meetings, and the fact that he said under testimony today that in fact this Steele dossier could never be used in a court of law, but it was used as the basis for a FISA warrant to get FISA court approval on spying on Americans?
I'm sorry, sir, go ahead.
I didn't know which John you were talking to.
I'll ask John Solomon first. John Solomon.
Sorry, sir. Listen, many of the members I talked to said they thought that was one of the most important revelations today, that Bruce Orr said he's never heard, nor has his wife ever heard from Special Counsel Mueller. If Mueller wanted to get to the bottom of this, the questions that Congress has raised that are now in the public, whether the FISA warrant was legitimate and the origins of this investigation were legitimate, you would think at the very least he'd want to talk to Bruce Orr and find out why was he playing the intermediary role. I was told today emphatically Bruce Orr has said he was never interviewed. I think that raises a lot of questions for people in Congress. What is Bob Mueller really up to?
He worked, now we have 63 pages of text, emails, and handwritten notes, Congressman, between Orr and Steele. Steele had already been fired for lying and leaking. He got paid not only by Clinton through Fusion GPS and the DNC through Fusion GPS, but he also was on the record as hating Donald Trump, saying he was desperate that Trump not get elected and passionate about him not being president. Did he comment on any of that today?
He did. I can probably summarize it the best way like this, Sean. When the Department of Justice walks into the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court and says, we want a warrant to spy on an American citizen, and the central piece of our evidence in our case is a dossier, there's an obligation to say, oh, and by the way, the number 4 person in our organization and his wife had major prominent operational roles with respect to how that dossier was put together, how the FBI received it, and by the way, they were paid handsomely by third parties for that. Those are what we call material facts. They're material facts that have to be disclosed, and in this case, they weren't.
But he said today, as I understand it, that in fact he told the FBI that his wife had put this together, and they still used him as a back channel. So they never told the FISA court that piece of evidence. They never told the FISA court who paid for the dossier. So the only conclusion is now we know, it's irrefutable at this point, that the FISA court was repeatedly lied to in 4 separate FISA applications. Is that a true statement?
Well, here's what he said, or here's what I can tell you about his testimony today. My real question walking in, Sean, was what did the FBI and the Department of Justice know about Bruce Orr and his wife?
The FBI knew, I'm told.
His testimony today was that he gave us a list of a half a dozen senior FBI and Department of Justice officials that he told of his involvement, his wife's involvement, all of the details of their interactions with Christopher Steele, with Glenn Simpson, with the payment. And these are names, Sean, that would be familiar to you. I've heard you say some of these names on your program before. And I can tell you, as someone that has reviewed the FISA applications, the unredacted versions, I can't talk about what's in there, but I can tell you what's not in there. And what's not in there is any information about Nellie and Bruce Orr.
Well,